and, of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GBNews,
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight.
I can confirm that our planes did shoot down a number of Iranian attack drones.
Is Britain being dragged into an all-out war in the Middle East? Angela Rayner and the political scandal that won't go away. If she was a Conservative, she'd have been gone weeks ago. And whatever happened to Hugh Edwards? Why the BBC are still paying him £500,000 a year? I'll be breaking the conspiracy of silence around one of the corporation's biggest stars. So much to get through, a really busy show. I'll be dealing with the Hugh Edwards story and the BBC at 10 o'clock. Angela Rayner is first up in the firing line. So 2 hours of big opinion, big debate and big entertainment. Lots to get through. First, the news headlines and Aaron Armstrong.
Thanks, Mark. Very good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Iran risks provoking an uncontrollable regional escalation, a warning from world leaders following last night's attack on Israel. G7 leaders, including Lord Cameron, have been meeting to discuss the crisis in the Middle East. They've condemned Iran's attack and say they stand ready to take further measures. They say Israel says it will extract a price from Iran when the time is right, describing the Islamic Republic as the greatest threat to regional stability and world order. Iran, meanwhile, says it will launch a much larger assault if Israel retaliates. President Biden has warned his Israeli counterpart, Benjamin Netanyahu, the US will not take part in any retaliatory strikes. And White House spokesman John Kirby says Israel must decide on the next move.
We need to see what the War Cabinet decides in terms of whatever next step they want to pursue, and that's a sovereign decision, of course, that our Israeli counterparts have to make. I will just say this. President Biden, since the beginning of this conflict, has worked very hard to keep this from becoming a broader regional war.
Well, earlier, Rishi Sunak confirmed RAF planes did shoot down a number of Iranian drones and missiles in what he's described as a dangerous escalation in the region. Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy is urging the government to issue sanctions against Iran's Revolutionary Guard.
This highlights once again the extreme danger of the IRGC and the Iranian Guard. We have said that we think that it should be prescribed, and it is for the government to come forward with new plans to prescribe them and to deal with this issue of state actors that would behave in this appalling way that wreaks terror on a wider community.
More than 250 survivors of the Manchester Arena bombing are taking legal action against MI5. 22 people died in the explosion in May 2017 and hundreds more were injured. Lawyers representing injured survivors have confirmed they've submitted a group claim to an independent judicial body. An inquiry found the bombing may have been prevented if MI5 had acted on intelligence received in the months leading up to the attack. Last year, MI5's director, Ken McCallum, said he was profoundly sorry that they were unable to prevent the atrocity. Cabinet ministers insisted the government's Rwanda plans on track, with flights due to take off within weeks. Health Secretary Victoria Atkins says the Home Office is ready to go, despite the troubled bill still making its way through Parliament. No airline's been named to transport the asylum seekers after Rwanda's state-owned carrier turned down a request. The Prime Minister has repeatedly said the flights would take off by spring, although no date has been set. We'll have more in our later bulletins, or you can get more information right now on all of our stories by scanning the QR code on your screen. The website has more details. That's it for the moment. Now it's back to Mark.
Thanks, Aaron. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. In the big story, is Britain being dragged into an all-out war in the Middle East? As the boss of M&S expresses deep concerns about some of their policies, would a union-loving Labour government bankrupt Britain? I'll be asking former Minister Edwina Currie. In my take at 10, whatever happened to Hugh Edwards? Why the BBC are still paying him £500,000. I'll be breaking the conspiracy of silence around one of the corporation's biggest stars. That's at 10. I'll be exposing some shocking information. You won't want to miss it. We'll also bring you Mark Meets, Anne Widdecombe and Liz Truss's favourite policy guru. With me tonight, my top pundits, Emma Webb, Neil Parish and Nigel Nelson. Plus, the most important part of the show, your emails, your comments. Get in touch. gbnews.com/your say. And this show has a golden rule. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. A big 2 hours to come. I'll be dealing with Hugh Edwards at 10. Where is he? But first, my big opinion. Poor old Angela Rayner. She used to be so talkative. If politicians were in hot water like Boris Johnson during Partygate, she was out of the traps, like an eager greyhound chasing the stuffed rabbits of a political scandal. She's always going around talking about her working-class credentials, even though a leading commentator on this very show last night, Dr. Lisa McKenzie, begs to differ.
Angela Rayner is guilty of hypocrisy and of being a class traitor.
Ouch. Now, Angela reportedly loves teasing colleagues about how she used to distract Boris Johnson by crossing her legs provocatively at Prime Minister's questions, revealing what she has allegedly described as the ginger growler. And this most vocal of politicians made no apologies for calling her Conservative opponents scum. So in the end, this lively and compelling political figure, who I've always liked, is never backwards about coming forwards. But for weeks now, the ginger growler has lost her bark. It's rough. Perhaps she was hoping that the political drama around whether or not she lived at one address or another 10 years ago would go quietly away. Wishful thinking is a meagre currency in the world of politics. Now, we don't need to get into the details of the story. She's very clear that she's done nothing wrong. And there is a police investigation ongoing, and we need due process. The problem is, this investigation could take months, which is a political headache for Rayner's boss, Sir Keir Starmer. Now, it's my view that following wrong positions on Brexit, lockdowns, trans rights, his support for Jeremy Corbyn, energy security and his aborted Green Revolution, Sir Keir Starmer is a man of extremely poor political judgment. I think you'll see it when he inevitably becomes Prime Minister. And in his steadfast support for Rayner, he may once again pay a heavy political price. Not because she's guilty or not guilty, but because so many questions remain unanswered. Now, Rayner has said that she has legal advice confirming that she acted properly. But she hasn't shown that legal advice to her boss, Sir Keir Starmer, and he hasn't asked to see it. I'm so confused. First of all, as Labour leader, surely he would be interested in seeing this evidence, and He's a former top lawyer. He's always telling us, isn't he, that he's a former top lawyer, plus his mother was a nurse and his father a toolmaker. Have you not heard? Every day, the Rayner plot thickens. This drama is lengthier than the film Oppenheimer and with just as much explosive material. With today's Mail on Sunday reporting that her former chief advisor, Matt Finnegan, has given a statement to Greater Manchester Police, effectively calling her a liar. He told the force that her actual home was with her then-husband, not at the former council house where she was registered on the electoral roll. Now, who knows what the truth is? This could be right, this could be wrong. I'm not going to take sides. Angela Rayner could be as innocent as they come and as pure as the driven snow. But the double standards at play here politically are beyond reasonable doubt. If the high heel was on the other foot, Angela Rayner would be calling for her opposite number to step down. And it's my view that a Conservative minister under similar circumstances would be long gone. But of course, fence-sitter-in-chief Starmer doesn't want to rock the boat with different factions in his own party. He's already in enough hot water with his stance on Israel and his efforts to modernise the party and adopt a Blairite agenda. But this is a damaging drama that chips away at the credibility of the people who will likely form our next government. Angela Rayner remains in post for now, but with more unanswered questions than a game of Trivial Pursuit. Your reaction, a brand new way to communicate with the show. gbnews.com/your say. I'll get to your thoughts very shortly, but with me tonight, my top pundits, ringside action for the big stories of the day. I'm delighted to welcome none other than writer and broadcaster Emma Webb, former Conservative MP and farmer Neil Parish, and GB News' very own senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Great to have all three of you with me. Neil Parish, let me start with you. I do think that this story raises many unanswered questions.
It does, and of course Angela Rayner, as you rightly said, she's an attack dog, basically. She's a rottweiler. She has a go. She's a
bit of a growler, isn't she?
Yeah, she does. And so therefore, you know, some I would give more sympathy to. Angela, I would not, because I think at the end of the day, she's dished it out on everybody.
Did she dish it out on you at all when you were feeling the heat a few months ago?
Not particularly. Nothing personal. No. So, but she is very good at, you know, calling for people's resignations, going for the jugular. And so this time, you see, you take on Friday, you had Keir Starmer going out announcing that he will not only keep, but he'll enhance the nuclear deterrent, and he would use it, unlike Jeremy Corbyn, remember, who had a deterrent, but he wouldn't use it. Not really a deterrent at the end of the day. So he was putting the defence of the realm. Importantly was Keir Starmer, but of course, on the same day...
But Keir Starmer wanted Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister, and Corbyn would not be led on whether he'd press the nuclear button. But now Keir Starmer is Mr. Nuclear, almost like a U-turn.
Yes, exactly. But also the point I'm trying to make, Mark, too, is that you see on the same day that he's announcing all of this strong defence position, you've got the position of Angela Rayner being raised again. Which house was she living in? Has she committed offence or not? And in politics, in a way, it doesn't altogether matter whether you're guilty or whether you're innocent. It's how long the story continues. And so if it continues a lot more, then I suspect she will have to stand down. But of course, don't forget, Keir Starmer can't, under Labour policy, you know, the Labour way the Labour Party runs itself, can't just fire her. Because she's elected, as you know, by the party, and that is also a problem. But you know, let's see how it plays out. Let's see how the investigation takes place. But you know, I don't think in Westminster, dare I say it, is there a huge amount of sympathy. Certainly not from the Conservative side, the Tory side. But I suspect even on her own side, perhaps some people would not be weeping too much if she was to go.
Emma Webb, great to have you back on the show. Your reaction to this story. Now, we want to have due process. On Mark Dolan tonight, everyone is innocent until proven guilty, and therefore the police investigation is ongoing. The essence of my big opinion monologue is about the politics of this and the political double standards. I think if it was a Conservative counterpart, they'd have been gone weeks ago.
Yeah, so normally I would say with this kind of thing, I think people are sick of it. I think people are sick of the kind of Westminster bubble. It almost comes across as gossip, even like Cakegate. But the issue with Angela Rayner is, of course, the hypocrisy. And I think that's what makes it impossible to have sympathy with her, because she has been the person who's been calling for other people to publish their tax returns, to resign. She's tried to make herself out to be Madame Ethics in Parliament. And she might have made an error. It seems unlikely that this is something that you could, an error that you could honestly make. And I think it's quite interesting that the way she phrased her "I will resign if" was quite canny. It's very, very specific. If she's found to be criminally culpable, essentially, are the circumstances under which she would resign. So I think she's trying to leave the door open because, of course, there's is it a statute of limitations? There's a certain amount of time after which, so she's not going to be prosecuted, even if she has made a mistake. So I think politically this is going to be very difficult for Keir Starmer, because there's no way in which she can come back and try to make demands for the calibre of the way that the House conducts itself without it being levelled that she's a hypocrite. And just in terms of the politics of it, I think that this is just a small glimpse of what we will see if we have a Labour government, because we've obviously had a lot more focus on the Conservative Party because they're in power. But once the Labour Party are in power, all of these fault lines will become very, very clear, and there'll be a lot more scrutiny. And I'm not sure that they will hold up to that.
Nigel Nelson, if the shoe was on the other foot and this was a Conservative minister, Sir Keir Starmer would be all over them like a rash.
Yeah, I'm sure they would, and that's politics. So I've no doubt about that. And I think that Emma and Neil have identified the real problem with the Angela Rayner story is what she said about other people. However, this is substantially different, that the police decided it wasn't worth their time or trouble to investigate this. So that's what happened to an ordinary person. Angela Rayner's not an ordinary person, and suddenly we get James Daly, the Tory vice-chairman, making a complaint to the police. The police are in a situation whereby they can't be seen to be politically partisan, so they must conduct this investigation. I'm fairly sure at the end of it, nothing will come of it. Angela Rayner will carry on being deputy leader and become deputy prime minister. But yes, I mean, there is this tricky bit. I think in the future she might be a bit more careful about calling for resignations of Tory ministers.
Why doesn't Keir Starmer want to see the legal advice that she's received? He's one of the country's top lawyers.
Yeah, he didn't need to. I mean, the reason for
that... But he hasn't seen it.
No, he hasn't seen it, and he didn't need to see it.
Wouldn't you want to have a glance at it? Well, maybe a couple of paragraphs? A Boris Johnson-style one-pager of the basics?
You see, I'm suspicious, and I think the legal advice probably isn't that good. So if he's seen it, then, of course, if it turns out not to be so good, he is then culpable of seeing it. I don't think he wants to see the legal advice in case... I mean, this is politics again, because if it does turn...
Nigel...
Keir Starmer will want to be able to just distance
Nigel,
himself.
I mean, Angela Rayner hasn't shown it to her boss, and he doesn't want to see it. This is a pantomime, and I think a mockery to the British people.
Not really. I mean, the whole thing is that the legal advice and the tax advice that she got through, that was looked at by her team to make sure that she was in the clear, and then it was looked at in Keir Starmer's office. So
was he in the office at the time, like having a cup of tea?
I wasn't there.
Desk?
I wasn't there, so I can't help you with that one.
Maybe.
But
you must admit, it's a touch comical.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, would you want to see all the advice a member of your staff had actually got?
Well, if it related to the Deputy Prime Minister, or at least my Deputy as Labour leader, I would certainly want to see any material that implicated or indeed didn't implicate her. Of course I would, especially if I was a lawyer with a head for these things.
Previous Attorney General, for God's sake. You know,
he's not afraid of boring documents,
exactly.
is he?
And he surely the legal side is what matters to him. I'm very suspicious why he doesn't want to see it, but that's just me being a politician.
Maybe he's just been very busy.
An observation in the Telegraph today that I thought was very good is that if she does, and it's interesting that she has chosen not to just release her tax return, if that would clear up all of the conversation around this.
But it's not a tax return, bear in mind, it's tax advice, which contains a load of personal material, and her argument would be, and I think reasonably, this is a private document. It's not like saying, here, this is the tax I've paid.
So the point that was made in the Telegraph, which I thought was quite interesting, is that if she were to release some of this personal information, then it might reveal her to not quite be the working-class warrior, having a financial situation that maybe a lot of people wouldn't be able to relate to.
Champagne socialist, perish the thought. It would never happen.
There's none of them around.
Listen, it's really, really important to stress that Angela Rayner denies any wrongdoing. She has received legal advice confirming she's acted with propriety. There's now a police investigation. That needs due process. So let's hold fire until we have the outcome of that investigation. Until then, innocent until proven guilty. What I will add, though, is that the politics of this, I believe, will linger for a long time going forward. Coming up next in the big story, is Britain being dragged into an all-out war in the Middle East? We'll debate that next.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Children's stories like Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland now come with a trigger warning at universities, alerting readers to possible themes of white supremacy.
Yes, these warnings are being applied to colonial narratives, that's the claim, commonly found in adventure stories and famous novels from the Victorian era. Well, joining us now is the actor Charlie Lawson. And Charlie, these warnings have been applied to Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland. What's this university getting at?
Well, look, first of all, this is nothing new. We hadn't heard about it for a while. Universities have been doing this over the last couple of years. I remember having a chat with one of your colleagues. But when Gabriella, the lovely Gabby, phoned me up today, I had to beg her to put me on after 9 o'clock because I found myself getting rather irate about the whole thing. But I will do my best to be very polite.
Yes, keep it clean.
Yes, look, which is quite difficult for me, as you'll appreciate, over this subject. Look, this is universities just jumping on the same trying to be relevant bandwagon. Is it any wonder that we look at the quality of graduates from university, and in my humble opinion, some of them are slightly disappointing. But I did phone a couple of people I knew who had sons and daughters at various leading universities, and they had been speaking this morning. And thank the Lord, they think it's a complete load of bloody nonsense, as I do. Give the C.S. Lewis Centre a ring in East Belfast, because that's where your man came from. And I think you'll find you'll get short shrift, because we're not all about that in East Belfast. We don't censor anything.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a big reaction to my big opinion. The Angela Rayner affair raises more unanswered questions than a game of Trivial Pursuit. But it's not trivial for the country because these folks will likely be in charge in a few months' time. Well, the emails are coming in. I've got to stop calling it emails because it's a brand new way of messaging the show. And you've been heading over to our brilliant new messaging service. And let me see what I've got. Lynn does not agree. She's not happy with me. Lynn says, you say a Conservative MP would resign in the same position as Angela Rayner. Please, they get away with tax evasion, sent texts, breaking COVID rules, telling blatant lies, claiming unlawful expenses. For God's sakes, I'm disappointed in your take on this, says Lynn. Meanwhile, Ian says Angela Rayner will get away with lying just like Currygate and Beergate. Her and Flip Flop will wreck this country even more than the Tories. How do I know? Because I live in Wales, says Ian. And how about this from Darryl, who says, hi, Mark. Yes, we all know that Sir Keir Starmer's dad was indeed a toolmaker, unfortunately. Great stuff. Keep those messages coming. Don't forget, at 10 o'clock in My Take at 10, 35 minutes from now, I'll be dealing with the BBC's Hugh Edwards. £500,000 a year, hasn't been on telly for 9 months. What's going on? I shall reveal all at 10. But it's time now for the big story, and whilst we were on air last night, we broke the news that Iran had launched in excess of 150 drones and missiles on Israel. Now, whilst the vast majority of these unmanned aircraft and rockets were intercepted by Israeli, British and American forces, the Prime Minister confirmed that the problem continues. How do Israel respond? Take a listen to the Prime Minister.
I can confirm that our planes did shoot down a number of Iranian attack drones. I don't want to pay tribute to the bravery and professionalism of our pilots flying into the face of danger.
The ramifications of this attack will likely be lasting in the region. So what does last night mean for Israel's effort to eliminate Hamas? What does it tell us about the nature of the Iranian regime? And do Britain and America risk being dragged into another expensive and bloody war in the Middle East? Well, to debate this, I'm delighted to welcome Captain Reserve of Israel's Special Forces, Eyal Biram. Mr. Biram, thank you so much for joining us on Mark Dolan tonight. What is your reaction to what happened last night? Were you surprised?
I think we all were very surprised, although there was an intelligence and the IDF, together with the coalition led by the US, preparing for a situation and similar attack. We never expected Iran to shoot such an unprecedented attack with 300 missiles, UAVs and more to Israel, including ballistic missiles. Important to say, these missiles one day can take the same ammunition, the same nuclear ammunition that Iran aims to create. And that's why I'm very worried.
So last night's rockets could be nuclear rockets in years to come.
The same ballistic rockets.
And the damage that one nuclear rocket could do to Israel, wipe out half the country?
Israel is a very small country. You should remember it. Israel is a very small country with just less than 10 million people. Although Israel lives in a very complicated area, we should always remember that Israel is the front line for Britain, for France, for the US. And that's why yesterday night, on the one hand, was a great accomplishment. We saw the coalition led by the US, with the UK, with French, fighting and taking down 99% of the rockets. But on the same time, we understand that Iran is not threatened. They are not deterred. And the question is how to use the same coalition that yesterday did such a successful operation to prevent Iran from doing it again. And that's a big question, and the question that the Israeli government right now is dealing with.
Now, my viewers and listeners are naturally very concerned about what's happening in Israel, very sympathetic to the Israeli people. October the 7th was the single worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust, and I lost count of the number of emails and messages I got from my viewers and listeners in their support. So the public send their best wishes to the Israeli people. But why does it matter to my viewers and listeners to protect the state of Israel? It's thousands of miles away. Why is it important?
Similar to what happened yesterday, the attack shot on Israel was also 1,000 kilometers away from Iranian soil. And this is the first time it's happening since the revolution in Iran in 1979. Why it's important for the UK? Because the same missiles that right now have been shot in Israel yesterday night is the one that for the last almost 2 years and more been shot in Ukraine. This is the same Iranian ammunition. And the same one that one day, if we will not prevent Iran from achieving their goal of Islamic Caliphate from Iran to Egypt, they will also attack Europe. And that's why I'm also concerned, on the one hand, after seeing this great accomplishment, by the question seeing after the G7 committee today meeting and discussing what should prevent Iran from doing it, if the G7 will be able to announce a deterrent message for Iran that will prevent them to do it again. That's why Israel is concerned.
So you think it's possible that in the years ahead, Iran could attack the United Kingdom?
I think Iran has an achievement and has a goal, and their goal is to create an Islamic caliphate. From, as I said, from Iran to Egypt, they will do whatever they can in order to achieve
to turn the entire planet into an Islamic caliphate.
Specifically the Middle East, but if the UK will prevent them from doing it, they will attack the UK. They're not afraid. They're not also taking care of their people. We saw today happening a rally in front of the Iranian embassy of Iranian people who live in the UK who are opposing the Iranian regime. And that's why it's important to understand that this is not a war between the Iranian people and Israel. This is a war between a radical regime that led the proxies all around the Middle East, including Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and also including Gaza with Hamas. And this is a question if these radical proxies and Iran itself will be able to deter it from doing it again.
Iran, of course, supported to a certain degree by China and Russia. How close are we to World War III?
In my point of view, this is why the response for Iran attack is important. Like what's happened with Ukraine and the result for the coalition government to support the Ukraine, this is a question not about Israel. I know Israel will be able to attack back, but this is a question, what is the Western world, the civilization should do in order to make sure that Iran would not interested in doing it again, not just in order their capabilities. We know they have the capabilities. It's a question of deterring Iran.
Israel's self-defense was very successful last night. I'm sure you're very proud of what was achieved with the support of allied forces. However, the President of the United States has said to your Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, to accept that victory, to take the win, is a direct quote from Joe Biden. Do you think that Israel should turn the other cheek and not retaliate and instead seek to de-escalate the situation?
I think the de-escalation will be when Iran will be deterred. The question is how to deter Iran. Israel is not interested in attacking back. Israel is hopeful will be able to create the same peace that happened on October 6th, since Hamas broke and started this war. In my point of view, Israel should do one main step, which is making sure that the proxies that all around Israel, and I'm speaking about Lebanon, about Hezbollah, and also about Hamas, and other proxies in Yemen and in Iraq and Syria, would be deterred. And how to deter them? I think part of the work is to finish the war in Gaza. I'm hopeful that it will happen soon. And I think as soon as it will happen soon, it will also be good both for Israelis and also for the Gazans people.
Lastly, can we talk about the people in Israel, ordinary folk, last night? How does it feel to be in a country which has got rockets and drones raining in the skies?
Yesterday, it felt like a reality show. We saw how Israel, on one hand, could almost be eliminated from the earth. This is what the Iranian vision is. And on the other hand, how many allies gathered together to prevent it. I'm worried not because what's happened yesterday. I'm worried because October 7 was a situation when Israel was not prepared. It can be one morning or one night when Iran will decide to attack Israel. And for that specific night, Israel will not be prepared as it was yesterday night for the last 12 days.
Mr. Baram, I wish you and the Israeli people well. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you very much for having me.
Ayal Baram there. Thank you very much. Captain Reserve of Israel's Special Forces. Now up next, as the boss of M&S expresses deep concerns about some of their policies, would a union-loving Labour government bankrupt Britain? Can Britain afford Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer? I'll be asking former Minister Edwina Currie next.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So there has been plenty of showers around in the north, all thanks to an area of low pressure situated out towards the north of the UK at the moment, but it will slowly move its way towards us through the rest of the weekend and into the start of Monday. Higher pressure does stay close by towards the south and west for a time, bringing some clear skies through the Sunday evening, but those showers in the north and west slowly push their way south and eastwards as we go through the early hours of Monday morning, turning particularly heavy across northern parts of England. And we could even see some snow across the high ground of Scotland. And it will be a chilly night here, temperatures dropping into the low single figures, and even in the south, around 7 or 8 degrees. Monday starts a bit chilly, but quite a blustery start to the day. Brisk northwesterly winds help clear that band of rain across the southeast through Monday morning, leaving a drier day. There will be some sunshine around, but some showers quite quickly developing from the northwest. These turning wintry across the high ground of northern England and Scotland, and it will be a much chillier day than we've seen over the weekend. Struggling to reach much above 12 or 13 in the south, and even struggling to reach double figures in the north. Tuesday does start a bit drier for most of us, though. There will be plenty of sunshine through the morning. Still the odd 1 or 2 showers around across northern and western parts, and perhaps a few bubbling up across eastern parts of England, but there should be plenty of sunshine around. However, temperatures still close to average. Still a few showers around on Wednesday and Thursday, but there are hints of something more settled later in the week, and temperatures returning closer to average.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Well, a big reaction to my conversation there with a former Israeli military leader. And the emails have been coming in, the messages at gbnews/your say. Of course, Iran wants to make Britain into an Islamic country. Why are so many young men of fighting age entering the UK? That's from Jack. Michael says, I believe last night's drone strike was a practice run to see what it would take to bring down Israel's Iron Dome. DB says Labour will absolutely ruin this country if they get in. And Tom says, hooray, this is the first time that /your say has worked. That's right, a brand new way of messaging Mark Dolan tonight and all the shows on GB News. It's gbnews/your say. Thanks for bearing with us. Even I'm trying to get used to not saying emails and get the address right. But look, this show has always been about your comments, your feedback, and it always will be. Now, Hugh Edwards at 10 o'clock. Where's he gone? That's my take at 10. But next up, the chairman of Marks & Spencer has warned that Britain risks being unable to attract investment if a Labour election victory results in an overhaul of workers' rights, something currently being considered by the leadership. Mr. Archie Norman said any incoming government should consider carefully whether a package that reduces flexibility, makes it more costly to hire people and seeks to bring unions back into the workplace will help attract new investment. Now, Labour's plans under consideration involve axing zero-hours contracts, empowering unions over working conditions and pay disputes, and potentially giving workers full employment rights from day one with no probation. So, is the boss of M&S right to flag up these concerns? Could a union-loving Labour government bankrupt Britain? Let's get the views of former government minister and ex-BBC Radio 5 Live presenter When It Was Good, Edwina Currie. Edwina, should Sir Keir Starmer heed the concerns of the M&S boss?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And he's not the only one. They've been having a bit of a charm offensive recently, Mark, going around in the city, headed by Chukwuemeka. Do you remember Chukwuemeka?
Of course I do. He was a new Labour acolyte.
That's right. Well, he's now working for JP Morgan. So he's gone up in the world somewhat, and he's been organising city lunches for some of his friends and for some senior people. Now, the problem with the whole of their campaign and the whole of their approach, we can see all around us with the kind of strikes that are still being called by unions, representing people on very big salaries, you know, the train drivers, for example, and who really don't care about the effect that that has on the public. And they don't care about the effect that has on the working class and the real working people at all. It's all a complete sham. We know what the effect will be if the unions become more powerful. But as Archie Norman says, and of course he was a member of Parliament at one stage as well, as Archie Norman says, the effect of giving the workers and the unions more rights is to raise costs. We've already seen huge increases in costs in employment in this country, and the outcome of that is inflationary. So that also hurts the weakest in society most. And sooner or later, it also affects, well, just about everybody. I mean, the group that I'm particularly concerned about with this actually is not the Archie Normans and the Marks and Spencers. The big companies can cope with all this. It's the effect that it has on small businesses and self-employed people trying to run a little company with maybe 2 or 3 employees. If they can't get rid of somebody incompetent or somebody who's dodgy in some way, then basically that business is wrecked. It doesn't affect Marks and Spencer so much, but it does affect the smaller companies. And that, I think, will be the outcome of the various legal changes which Labour have been busy touting around the country in the boardrooms and saying, look, this is what we want to do. Isn't it a good idea? No, it's not. We've been there before, and it was a wreck last time. It'd be a wreck in future.
But isn't this scaremongering by the Conservatives? After all, it was the Tories who said that the minimum wage would be inflationary and lead to unemployment. Neither happened.
Well, the minimum wage is inflationary. We've just shoved it up. Watch what happens to inflation this month. Now, you know, I trade as economist. This is my forecast, Mark. It will go up this month. And it also, in the moment you start to have rules and to make it much harder to employ people for what they're worth, then you're going to find that your productivity goes down, your costs go up, and we continue to be a country of low growth. We really need to encourage investment. We need to raise our game in a much better way. And we need to do that by being as flexible as possible, not as rigid as possible.
Labour want to axe 0 hours contracts. Surely that's a good thing. They're immoral, aren't they? With people with families not sure how much work is going to be coming in every day and every week.
But that suits a lot of people. That actually suits a lot of people. It suits students, for example. It suits all sorts of people who perhaps want to work part-time, who may want to be available at certain times but not available at other times, people who have other caring responsibilities. To say you can't do this, first of all, it's an erosion of our freedoms, and I think people should be cross about that. But secondly, the freedoms include those of people trying to run small businesses who may want to open longer hours over Christmas, for example, or in the summer if they're seasonal, and who don't want to be stuck in permanent arrangements where they're having to, you know, think about who they're hiring and firing. You know, France has much stricter rules about employment than we have. And one of the outcomes of that is it's very difficult to run a business in France because it's almost impossible to sack anybody. And the outcome of that is they don't get the inward investment that we have become accustomed to, particularly back in the glory days of Margaret Thatcher when she loosened up a lot of this. Liz Truss used to talk about supply-side reforms. She didn't have time to do any, but actually making it easier to employ people and easier to fire them if they're no good, and easier to employ them on the hours that the business needs, and also reminding business, if you don't look after your workforce, they're not going to look after you, they're not going to be there when you need them. That is the kind of freedom that I think we should be aiming for. It's a much more successful outcome in the long run.
And of course, investment in France is lower. The UK has just leapfrogged France in relation to manufacturing, and unemployment is far higher in France as well. Edwina, stay with us. Let's bring in my top pundits, Emma Webb, Neil Parish and Nigel Nelson. Nigel, why would you empower the unions, given that even under this current Conservative government, they have wrought chaos?
Well, I mean, workers are entitled to a bit to collective bargaining and organised labour. And what we get every time that someone suggests more rights for workers, you get fat cat business leaders squinnying about the cost of it. It won't work. You mentioned, Mark, the way they behaved over minimum wage. I mean, the CBI were against it till 1995, until they eventually came on board. The minimum wage has worked perfectly. It's not stymied growth, it's not caused problems as far as the extra costs go. And the kind of things that are being proposed here are just basic common sense. I mean, hire and refire is a disgrace. Let's get rid of it. 0 hours contracts can still work. All it means is you will have some minimum guaranteed hours, so you know you've got some income coming in.
Emma Webb, are 0 hours contracts immoral? Do you think that workers' rights need a boost?
No, 0 hours contracts are not immoral. In fact, I've been on 0 hours contracts. I think that they're great for those for whom these contracts work. Of course, it could be a problem if you're only on a 0 hours contract. But like Edwina said, this is limiting people's freedom. I actually think that getting rid of 0 hours get rid of 0 hours contracts would be immoral because it would be limiting the freedom of the workers to take on the kind of work that they want to do and have that level of flexibility. And particularly as we're seeing the economy change, with more people working from home, more people working remotely and taking on different kinds of more flexible roles, possibly freelancing and taking on different kinds of contracts, that can actually be much more economically beneficial. And so why should the government have the ability to tell employees what sorts of contracts they're allowed to enter into an agreement with an employer over, or with a company? I think that actually completely, I think the opposite of what Nigel said there. I think that that this is going to hamstring businesses at a time when they really need the government's support. And yes, of course, it's important for people to have stable working environments. And of course, I'm sure that all sorts of employment contracts can be abused by bad faith actors. But I just simply think it's wrong to try to limit people's flexibility in that way.
What about, Neil Parish, workers having full rights from day one, another idea being considered by Labour? That would mean no probation. That'd be a problem on your farm, wouldn't it, if you've just employed someone that's never seen a cow before?
Yeah, I mean, I just can't understand this. I mean, I think now it's sort of 2 years. You could cut that back perhaps to 1 year. But the idea that there's no probationary period is madness. And also, they're saying that you can't necessarily contact that employer, that employee out of work hours. Well, you can imagine how that would work on a farm. You know, the cattle have got out, you know, fields underwater or whatever, and you can't call your worker. Now, I'm probably exaggerating where they'll take it, but I think, you see, I mean, I spent time in the European Parliament. I mean, France is a socialist state. It always has been and always will be, whether you've got a so-called conservative or a socialist government. So the last place we want to do is go there, because, you know, not only have there too many rights for the workers, you then don't employ somebody. Then when you've got an employee, they spend the rest of their lives, as far as I can see, then employing lawyers to argue employment law. Perhaps it's good for the lawyers, but it's not good for France.
So the French worker is more productive than a British worker?
Yeah, because there's fewer of them. And so what do we actually want? I mean, we do want greater productivity, but we also want as many people employed as possible. So the flexibility in the employment market is essential. And also, like I said, this idea of no probationary period for a worker...
No, there will be probation. Probation will stay.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's see what Labour brings in.
Devil's in the
at the
detail.
moment, Labour is being very, very coy and cautious. But, of course, once they get into power, and especially if they win a big result, a big majority, then we are in for trouble.
Nigel,
and the unions back.
Nigel and Edwina, let's play the 10-second game, because I've got my Mark Meets guest waiting in the wings. So very briefly, wrapping up your thoughts, Nigel Nelson, before I go to Edwina.
Worker rights won't harm productivity, won't harm the economy, and are a benefit to individuals.
You know what? You should be the leader of the Labour Party. Very persuasive, Nigel. Edwina, are you persuaded by Nigel's comments?
My comment to Nigel is you wish. You wish. There's no point in having improved rights if you're not actually going to have some effect. and the effect is going to be a very bad one for the rest of us.
Edwina, we always love having you on the show. Catch up soon. My thanks to former Government Minister and 5 Live presenter Edwina Currie. Lots more to get through. Don't forget, I'll be discussing Hugh Edwards at 10 o'clock. Where's he gone? I've got some shocking revelations. But next up, on the eve of the 35th anniversary of the Hillsborough tragedy, will the 97 victims ever get justice? I'll be speaking to a survivor next.
Tubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
You think this country needs new gas power stations? Apparently, this will all be about trying to get some form of energy security. Rishi Sunak has upset people today with this suggestion, people saying that actually this would do more damage to climate change than it would do good. Where are you on it, Richard?
I'll tell you exactly where. We need a lot more gas power stations and nuclear power stations because quite often the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Last week, we imported 16% of all our electricity because we haven't got enough capacity in the UK, and we're now totally over-reliant on renewables.
The part of the problem is the lack of storage capacity, which the government has finally got round to addressing. I think this as backup is actually quite a sensible idea. But they are not doing anything, as far as I can tell. At the moment, it will be retrofitted to have storage capability, which seems to be utterly bonkers. I mean, anyone who's got solar panels, you know very well you're storing up energy. So it's about storage as much as production. They could have gone, 20 years ago, we could have had nuclear power. We could have done more. We haven't looked far enough ahead in the future, and we are in grave danger of making the same mistake. I mean, the other side of this is, what is the difference going to be? Blackouts are, they're irritating and...
Irritating? It'd be disastrous. It would literally destroy our economy.
Well, they would be now, but, some of us remember 3-day weeks and things like that. And in fact, I grew up thinking that everybody had, at least a couple of days a week when they had to eat off a primer stove and things.
This is, again, I don't want to harp on, but this is one of the problems in the politics in our country, isn't it? So many politicians, they just think in election cycles. Absolutely. They just think, what can I do and say to get my own backside re-elected at the next general election? They're not always looking ahead. Actually, politics aside, what is genuinely the best thing for this country?
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Where is Hugh Edwards? That's my take at 10 in 10 minutes' time. But it's time now for Mark Meets. And tomorrow sees the 35th anniversary of one of the greatest tragedies in British history, the Hillsborough disaster, in which a fatal crowd crash happened at an FA Cup semi-final match between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest. It saw 97 deaths and 766 injuries. To remember this truly dark day and reflect on whether the families of those victims will ever see justice, I'm privileged to welcome one of the survivors from that day, the chairman of the Hillsborough Survivors Support Alliance, Peter Scarf. Peter, thank you so much for joining me. Can you remember what the atmosphere was like on match day before things went horribly wrong?
Yes, of course. It was a sunny day. Obviously, Liverpool fans were excited about facing Nottingham Forest. We were expecting the win and to move on to the final and get to Wembley. So I'd say weather was on our side. Everything seemed to be on our side at the time we were flying as a football club.
When did you first realise on the day that there was a problem and that things were on the turn?
When we arrived at the We got off the coach and we arrived at the Leppings Lane end and just seen this huge crowd of people trying to get into the stadium and only a few turnstiles.
And what happened to you? Did you observe what happened? Were you injured?
I'm not too physically injured. I had bruised ribs. I had a bruise on my wrist, the shape of my watch, for quite some time. But yeah, emotional scars more than anything.
And tell me about the lies, slurs and mythology that surrounds what happened 35 years ago. This tragedy has been misrepresented so often, hasn't it?
Yeah, of course. The lies that were peddled and continue to be peddled on the likes of social media still here to this day. I mean, obviously, it's everything from murderers robbing the dead, urinating on police officers, turning up drunk and ticketless. I still have my full ticket, including its stub, because it was never checked. Obviously, everyone knows the gate was opened and we were sent through there.
Peter, what would justice look like for the victims and their families?
Somebody being found accountable for the deaths of 97 who were unlawfully killed, the injuries that so many people sustained, and of course the mental scars that we continue to carry ourselves.
And tell me what you've been through. How has it impacted the rest of your life, Peter, what you witnessed that day? What have you been through?
Well, it changed my life completely. I was only 20 years of age at the time, and of course that's the time when your life's supposed to change anyway, where you become a man and you know, obviously employment and so on and so forth, family. I found it difficult I couldn't even stay with the girl I was with. My relationship broke down straight away, and then trying to settle down later, it took me several years before I could settle with somebody, and it was so much impact on myself. It changed me completely. I was, you know, easygoing lad, and I tried to continue the way I was, but I was literally burying my head in the sand.
Well, Peter, I wish we had longer. There was a bit of an issue with the line, but let me say that I salute the work you've done as chairman of the Hillsborough Survivors Support Alliance. More power to you as we remember that tragedy tomorrow. Next up, my take at 10. Don't go anywhere.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So there has been plenty of showers around in the north, all thanks to an area of low pressure situated out towards the north of the UK at the moment, but it will slowly move its way towards us through the rest of the weekend and into the start of Monday. Higher pressure does stay close by towards the south and west for a time, bringing some clear skies through the Sunday evening, but those showers in the north and west slowly push their way south and eastwards as we go through the early hours of Monday morning, turning particularly heavy across northern parts of England. And we could even see some snow across the high ground of Scotland. And it will be a chilly night here, temperatures dropping into the low single figures, and even in the south around 7 or 8 degrees. Monday starts a bit chilly, but quite a blustery start to the day. Brisk northwesterly winds help clear that band of rain across the southeast through Monday morning, leaving a drier day. There will be some sunshine around, but some showers quite quickly developing from the northwest. These turning wintry across the high ground of northern England and Scotland, and it will be a much chillier day than we've seen over the weekend. Struggling to reach much above 12 or 13 in the south, and even struggling to reach double figures in the north. Tuesday does start a bit drier for most of us, though. There will be plenty of sunshine through the morning. Still the odd 1 or 2 showers around across northern and western parts, and perhaps a few bubbling up across eastern parts of England, but there should be plenty of sunshine around. However, temperatures still close to average. Still a few showers around on Wednesday and Thursday, but there are hints of something more settled later in the week, and temperatures returning closer to average.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Variety Cruises have been sailing since 1942, and thanks to them, you could set sail in 2025. You have the chance to win a 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With your flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, you can choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. You'll also win an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash that you can use to make this summer spectacular. We'll also treat you to these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel. GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. Whatever happened to Hugh Edwards? And why are the BBC still paying him £500,000 a year? I'll be breaking the conspiracy of silence around one of the corporation's biggest stars. What's going on? As Rishi Sunak battles to save his Rwanda plan, is leaving the ECHR the new Brexit? And should the PM embrace the right of his party and bring back Liz Truss, Suella Braverman and Boris Johnson? Plus tomorrow's papers at 10:30 sharp with full pundit reaction. A very busy show, lots to get through. Hugh Edwards next, but first the news headlines with a proper newsreader, Aaron Armstrong.
Thank you, Mark. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Israel will respond to Iran's attack last night, but no final decisions have been made about how and when. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu chaired a meeting of his war cabinet earlier. The majority agree on the need for a response to Iran's drone assault, but they're split on the scale and the timing of it. World leaders, including Lord Cameron, have condemned the attack. They say Iran risks provoking an uncontrollable regional escalation, and they say G7 nations stand ready to take further measures. Tehran, however, has warned Israel any retaliation will be met with a stronger response. The UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, has told members of the Security Council civilians are paying the highest price, and now is the time to de-escalate.
The Middle East is on the brink. The people of the region are confronting a real danger of a devastating full-scale conflict. Now is the time to defuse and de-escalate. Now is the time for maximum restraint.
Rishi Sunak earlier revealed RAF planes took part in a number of counter-drone strikes overnight. He says, had Iran been successful, the fallout for regional stability would be hard to overstate. Israel's urged its allies to prescribe Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist group, and Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy says the government should act.
This highlights once again the extreme danger of the IRGC and the Iranian Guard. We have said that we think that it should be prescribed, and it is for the government to come forward with new plans to prescribe them and to deal with this issue of state actors that would behave in this appalling way that wreaks terror on a wider community.
More than 120,000 people have crossed the English Channel by small boats since 2018. 219 arrivals were recorded by the Home Office yesterday. The total for this year is now 17% higher than the same period last year. Labour Shadow Immigration Minister Stephen Kinnock's called it another grim milestone and says Britain must strengthen its border security. The Cabinet Minister has insisted the government's Rwanda plan is on track, with flights due to take off within weeks. Health Secretary Victoria Atkins says the Home Office is, quote, ready to go, despite the Trouble Bill still making its way through Parliament. No airline's been named to transport the asylum seekers after Rwanda's state-owned carrier turned down a request. The Prime Minister has repeatedly said the flights would take off by spring, although no date's been set. And more than 250 survivors of the 2017 Manchester Arena bombing are taking legal action against MI5. Lawyers representing injured survivors of the attack that killed 22 people say they've submitted a group claim. An inquiry found the bombing might have been prevented if MI5 had acted on intelligence received in the months leading up to the attack. MI5 Director General Ken McCallum has previously expressed deep regret that it was unable to stop the suicide bomber Salman Abedi. MI5 said it won't be commenting on ongoing legal proceedings. You can sign up to GB News Alerts for more on all of our stories. Scan the QR code that you can see right now. Our website has more details. Now it's back to Mark.
Welcome to a busy Mark Dolan tonight, as Rishi Sunak battles to save his Rwanda plan. Is leaving the ECHR the new Brexit? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, the formidable Anne Widdecombe. Also, should the Prime Minister embrace the right of his party and bring back Liz Truss, Suella Braverman and Boris Johnson? We'll discuss that in The Last Word with Liz Truss's favourite policy guru. Reacting to the big stories of the day, my top pundits this evening. For ringside action, we have Emma Webb, Neil Parish and Nigel Nelson. They'll also be reacting to tomorrow's newspaper front pages at 10:30 sharp. A packed hour, Anne Widdecombe waiting in the wings. The papers on their way. But first, my take at 10. There are so many people that I miss watching on TV. Cilla Black. Do you remember the amazing Cilla Black? Wasn't she fantastic? Surprise, surprise, blind date. Morecambe and Wise. What a double act. Terry Wogan. Pure broadcasting genius. Paul Daniels. What an entertainer with his magic tricks, cards and making things disappear. Amazing. What about Hugh Edwards? Do you remember him? The BBC 10 o'clock news, election coverage, Queen's funeral, gravitas, charm, wit and warmth. Is he on holiday? Where is he? Has he gone backpacking? Backsacking crack? Well, according to a cracking piece of journalism by the Sun newspaper, he certainly hasn't been sent packing by the BBC, far from it. The paper reports that even though Hugh Edwards has been absent from our screens for the best part of 9 months, he's still being paid almost £500,000 a year, which likely makes him the highest paid newsreader at the BBC. So even my basic mathematics will confirm that this calm under pressure news anchor has pulled in at least £250,000 since being off air. Nice work if you can get it. And who cares? It's money no object at the national state broadcaster because it's not their money they're spending. It's yours and mine. So where is the lesser spotted Hugh Edwards? Well, the Sun newspaper think they've tracked him down. They report that the silver-haired newsman is now living with his mother in scenic Carmarthenshire. Mummy knows best. The BBC's handling of the initial Hugh Edwards drama, in which it was alleged he paid £35,000 to a vulnerable young person in exchange for explicit images, was disastrous. I called it out at the time. I think Hugh Edwards featured in 3 or 4 Take at 10 monologues in a short period of time. That's something of a record, but probably not a record you want to achieve. Here's what I said about the Hugh Edwards story in July of last year. I'm one of those people that if you say that I can't talk about something, that's the thing I'm going to talk about. If you say, look away, nothing to see here, that's the first place I will look. Which is why I won't move on from the Hugh Edwards scandal, which is, of course, the great wish of the powerful figures in the media elite, who are clearly worried about such an establishment figure falling. They are circling the wagons to protect their own. Hugh Edwards is not the victim here. Until these allegations are denied and proved to be untrue, the status of victimhood exists only for the young person whose drug habit allegedly Edwards bankrolled with licence fee cash. What about that tan, by the way? Well, my comments haven't aged too badly. Since then, the BBC apologised to the parents of the young person allegedly involved and have promised to review their procedures. The parents don't seem too impressed with the apology, though. The person's mother told The Sun, "We have suffered immense pain." She said if the BBC had handled the complaint properly, they would not have had to go through this hell. Now, whilst I wish Mr. Edwards a speedy recovery from any mental health issues he's going through, I mean, I'll be honest, £250,000 in 9 months would set me right, this won't stop me discussing what looks to be a growing scandal at the nation's state broadcaster. His posh mates in the media would like to move on, but this man has been the face of the BBC's news operation and is paid a small fortune, courtesy of the licence fee, another word for tax, which hard-up grannies risk jail for not paying. So the establishment didn't want to and don't want to tackle the story, but I'm more than happy to. After all, I want to make sure that the British taxpayer gets value for money. And Hugh Edwards making £250,000 to sit at home twiddling his thumbs does not sound like value to me. Now, of course, the reason he's still on gardening leave and getting his hands dirty with those green fingers of his is because the BBC is still conducting an internal probe. It's been 9 months. The parents have complained, the BBC have apologised. Edwards hasn't explicitly denied anything. How much probing do you need to do? This isn't the bloody Watergate scandal. Now, I don't have a view as to whether Edwards should be back on the BBC or not. And he could be innocent of all allegations, no problem. But either way, how long is he going to sit there at taxpayers' expense doing crossword puzzles and working in his mother's garden? I've heard he likes a good-sized parsnip. This is an ongoing embarrassment for the BBC and a bizarre disappearing act that would have even Paul Daniels blushing. Your reaction, get your views in, gbnews.com/your say. I'll get to your thoughts shortly, but first my top pundits. Writer and broadcaster Emma Webb, former Tory MP and farmer Neil Parish, and GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Now, the debate here, Emma Webb, is the fact that £250,000 is being paid to essentially a kind of public state employee who hasn't done a stroke of work. I think this is a problem, and I think this debate is in the national interest.
I would be much more angry about this if I were a licence payer. I think, of course, it's an awful lot of money for somebody who's not doing their job. But at the same time, it is obviously procedure to keep somebody on their salary while they're doing the internal probe. But I agree with you that this investigation that they're doing shouldn't be taking so long. I was actually stunned to be reminded there that we were talking about this last July. That's how long this has been going on for. But ultimately, I think, you know, under the circumstances, not particularly strange that he might go and move in back with his family. But yeah, I mean, if you were a licence fee payer, you wouldn't be too happy to know that this was how your money was being spent.
But also, Emma, how long does it take to do an inquiry?
Well, it's how long is a piece of string? I mean, I don't see... I would like to know exactly what it is that they're looking into that's taking so long. But I'm not sure how interested people are in this.
Yeah, well, I think that I'm interested because it's a lot of money, Nigel Nelson. I don't know why the BBC are taking so long to investigate this. What's your view?
Well, I mean, what the BBC say is that they need to talk to Hugh Edwards about it, that we know that the police have ruled out any kind of criminal charges, so he's done nothing wrong as far as the law is concerned. What you need is an internal investigation by the BBC. That has no particular time limit any more than a suspension has a legal time limit. Where I think we all agree is that it is taking rather too long. And so it's something that the BBC ought to get wrapped up. But it does, at the end of the day, he should be paid his salary. It's not the amount of money. He just should be paid his salary while he is suspended until the BBC have decided what to do with him.
Now, Neil, if this chap, Hugh Edwards, has got mental health issues, I understand that when the story broke, he was actually being treated for some kind of mental condition, and we wish him well and a speedy recovery. Mental health is a serious issue. But what is also a serious issue is massive waste at the BBC, and I think this story reflects very badly on them. Why do they need 9 months to talk to Hugh Edwards? This is a guy that's used to 7-minute interviews.
I think, Mark, we don't know, do we, the mental state of Hugh Edwards at the moment. And I think, you know, while I absolutely agree with you the huge amount of money he's being paid and why he's still on full salary, I really don't know. I think the problem is, I suspect, his mental state and his health. And I think the BBC, you know, have got to try and bring it to fruition. But I imagine it's very much interviewing Hugh and being sure that he's able to have that interview. But what I can't understand is why so much, you know, so much money that the BBC, that as you rightly say, is being paid by licence payers, many who perhaps can't ill afford it. Why that money, you know, is being so much money is going to him, and I think that's what's got to be reviewed, because, like I said, we ourselves don't know in what state Hugh Edwards is at the moment. So I think we've got to be careful as far as that's concerned. But I think the amount of money he's being paid, surely that doesn't go on forever. And I would have thought under employment law, he would be, you know, that amount of money would be cut back quite a lot by now. And I think that is where the issue is. And then let's hope that Hugh Edwards recovers, the BBC gets on with that inquiry and brings this, you know, to fruition. But like I said, in the meantime, I think we have got to be conscious that we are dealing with somebody who is quite fragile.
Scrap the licence fee, that's what it's really about.
Yeah.
Yes, what makes you say that, Emma?
Well, I think, as Neil said, there are lots of people who may be struggling to afford the licence fee, and they might not even be watching the BBC. So I think that the model of the BBC, relying on these licences in the first place, is not a sustainable model for them, and that's going to have to change at some point. And so ultimately, the crux of your argument is that this is money that people are effectively being forced to pay that is going on this extraordinarily large salary that he's getting while on gardening leave. And what that really boils down to is the injustice of people being even so far as taken to court for not paying something that they're forced to pay for a product that they might not even be using.
Well, indeed. Listen, this is taking so long. I think it's a joke. It's a mockery to all the taxpayers out there. And the licence fee is a tax because you have to pay it if you want to watch television. Some people might say this is a non-story. Well, I don't agree, because if your money is being wasted, then in my book, that's a major story, and I will chase it, and I will chase it hard. And we'll keep an eye on the Hugh Edwards situation. Let me know your thoughts. But next up, as Rishi Sunak battles to save his Rwanda plan, is leaving the ECHR the new Brexit? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, Anne Widdecombe, next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The perception of a crime being committed is not based on whether that person intended to commit a crime or not, but whether the victim, in inverted commas, or anybody else for that matter who happened to hear whatever was said, determines that it was motivated by malice or ill will. Most of these things come out in heated exchanges or in, very casual exchanges. And then somebody says, oh, I'm offended or I'm hurt or I'm whatever because this was clearly malicious and it's against me as a black person or a transgender or sexuality, whatever it might be. And somebody says, I perceive this to be motivated by hate. Now, at that point, what is the reasonable test that anybody could apply as to what was in somebody's mind at the time? You don't know what I'm thinking now. I don't know what you're thinking now. Why is it that a crime can be committed on the basis of what somebody is alleged to be thinking?
Well, that's also how discrimination often works, because people have worked out these days that saying something or sending an email like one I received some years ago that said, let's go round her place with pickaxe handles and balaclavas and see what we can do. Now, that's an email that was sent about me. People have worked out that you don't do that. But from the circumstance of what happens, if racial taunts were being shouted, if taunts about someone's protected characteristic were being shouted in the run-up to what then happened, it would be pretty obvious that that was a hate crime.
But we know, for example, that street preachers have been arrested merely for quoting the Bible and without actually intending, anything beyond that.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Where is Hugh Edwards, and why is it taking the BBC so long to tackle those allegations around him? It's been almost 9 months now, and that's the best part of £350,000, as one of my brilliant viewers pointed out. It's well over £250,000 for doing nothing. GB News gbnews.com/your say is the brand new way of messaging the show. We've got Andrew, who says, I understand that if he's off sick with mental health issues, he can't be fired. How about this? Let's have a look. Look. 9 months of internal probing, says Michael. I bet he's having the time of his life. Some Tory MPs would pay good money for this. Can't imagine what you mean by that, Michael. You cannot sack someone whilst they are under a sick note, says Spike. And it was Pete who said £500,000 a year, 9 months of that is £375,000. There you go. I'm glad I'm not an accountant. Thank you very much for that. OK, folks, lots more to come. Papers on the way at 10:30, but Rishi Sunak has hit out at the complete overreach of an illegitimate ruling by the European Court of Human Rights that imposes a duty on governments to achieve net zero. The intervention from Downing Street comes ahead of a final round of votes on the Rwanda bill, which could pass by the end of this week, allowing the government to press ahead with plans for deportation flights. However, there are fears that the long-awaited flights could yet be thwarted by judges in Strasbourg. Mr. Sunak's comments will fuel speculation that he's considering including an unprecedented pledge in the Tory party manifesto to pull out of the ECHR, with sources telling the Telegraph newspaper that this has not been ruled out. So, is leaving the ECHR the new Brexit? And should Rishi Sunak make it his flagship policy going into the next election? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome my former government minister, very good friend of mine, television personality and, of course, newsmaker for this evening, Anne Widdecombe. Hello, Anne. Good evening to you.
Hello, Mark. Hi.
And you wanted us out of the European Union. Do you want us out of this European court as well? Would you unilaterally remove the UK from this structure with immediate effect?
Of course. I mean, you can tell there's a general election coming. Quite suddenly, Rishi Sunak, who could have taken this action when we had the very first Rwanda ruling, and suddenly discovers that he would like to pull us out of the ECHR. Well, what's he been waiting so long for? Answer, to put it in a manifesto to look good. But then they put Brexit in their manifesto, and where did that get us?
And the ECHR was formed in part by British judges and politicians in the aftermath of the Second World War and to prevent another Adolf Hitler. Do we really want to disown such an organisation?
Yes, we do want to disown it because just like the Geneva Convention on Asylum, which was 1951, it was designed for a completely different purpose for what it's now being used for. And I think Rishi Sunak is right, but I wouldn't trust him to do it because, as I say, he could have done it when we got the first Rwanda ruling.
If Britain ditches the ECHR, will it destroy our reputation as a country? And does that weigh on your mind?
Oh, look, when you actually look at ECHR rulings, we've got one of the best records of actually implementing them. Other countries treat it as advisory, which indeed it is, and they just don't implement the rulings. Now, we could do that, or we could be simply honest and say, enough, we're coming out. I don't think it will damage our reputation at all. What it might do is get a bit of focus on the part of ECHR as to what its role actually is, and we might seek some international agreement on that.
And the mood music suggests that flights to Rwanda could happen in the weeks ahead. Are you holding your breath?
No. It's very dangerous to hold my breath. The fact is that we've been promised this now so often and for so long. I will believe it when I actually see it. When the first flight leaves for Rwanda, and assuming it's got more than a couple of people on board, when a serious flight leaves for Rwanda, then I will believe it. But I still say, even if that does happen, and I support it if it does happen, he has spent 2 years with no plan B, during which time our shores have been invaded, there's no other way to put it, by illegal migrants.
And would Reform UK adopt the Rwanda plan, or is it your view that it's an expensive white elephant? Is it intrinsically flawed?
Oh, I don't think it's intrinsically flawed, but I think it is limited. And what Reform have made very clear is we're not going to rely just on Rwanda. Absolutely not. We are going to detain in secure accommodation all new asylum seekers so that we know where they are. They can't disappear into the underground economy.
And that sounds like a prison.
It isn't a prison, but it is a secure reception.
What's the difference?
Oh, well, I mean...
Can they go for a walk? Can they get a pret-a-manger?
Hold tight. We've already had, believe it or not, secure reception centres. They were there in my time. And they were used as, they were even called detention centres, but they were not the same as prisons. Families were together, for example. Children were getting proper education. It was a completely different situation. The only analogy with prison is you can't leave.
And last but not least, a life-size statue created in the memory of the late, great Southend West MP, Sir David Amess, has been unveiled. Sir David, who was a legendary and loved local MP, a highly esteemed parliamentarian, was fatally stabbed in his constituency in October of 2021. I understand you were in attendance. Tell me about the statue. Was it and is it a fitting tribute?
The statue is a tremendous tribute to David. The sculptor has got his expression exactly. I mean, all of us who looked at it when it had been unveiled said, yes, that's David. And I think it's a good memorial to him, and his light lives on. And we forget about the man who cut short his life and brought so much distress.
On that, we can agree. Anne, what a treat. I wish we had longer. We'll catch you in a week's time. My thanks to former government minister, author and television personality Anne Widdecombe. Next up, tomorrow's newspaper front pages with full pundit reaction. Plus, in an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll, we've been asking as Rishi Sunak battles to save his Rwanda plan, is leaving the ECHR the new Brexit? Well, the results are in. I shall reveal all next.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So there has been plenty of showers around in the north, all thanks to an area of low pressure situated out towards the north of the UK at the moment, but it will slowly move its way towards us through the rest of the weekend and into the start of Monday. Higher pressure does stay close by towards the south and west for a time, bringing some clear skies through the Sunday evening, but those showers in the north and west slowly push their way south and eastwards as we go through the early hours of Monday morning, turning particularly heavy across northern parts of England. And we could even see some snow across the high ground of Scotland. And it will be a chilly night here, temperatures dropping into the low single figures, and even in the south, around 7 or 8 degrees. Monday starts a bit chilly, but quite a blustery start to the day. Brisk northwesterly winds help clear that band of rain across the southeast through Monday morning, leaving a drier day. There will be some sunshine around, but some showers quite quickly developing from the northwest. These turning wintry across the high ground of northern England and Scotland, and it will be a much chillier day than we've seen over the weekend. Struggling to reach much above 12 or 13 in the south, and even struggling to reach double figures in the north. Tuesday does start a bit drier for most of us, though. There will be plenty of sunshine through the morning. Still the odd 1 or 2 showers around across northern and western parts, and perhaps a few bubbling up across eastern parts of England, but there should be plenty of sunshine around. However, temperatures still close to average. Still a few showers around on Wednesday and Thursday, but there are hints of something more settled later in the week, and temperatures returning closer to average.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Well, in an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll, we've been asking as Rishi Sunak battles to save his Rwanda plan, is leaving the ECHR the new Brexit? Well, the results are in. And how about that? 85% say yes, and less than 15% say no. That'll be a landslide. It is 10:30, so time for this. Papers and listen, Ark, where should we start? It looks like we've got the I newspaper or the Guardian. We go with the Guardian? OK, let's get the Guardian, please. And here is the Guardian's headline. as I shuffle the pack. US warning as Israel weighs up response to Iran's attack. The I newspaper next. Iran risks an uncontrollable wider war with Israel attacks. G7 nations warn. The Metro, reign of terror. Hundreds of missiles are fired in huge nighttime revenge raid. Times now, and Israel vows revenge as the world calls for calm. Also, Britain may try to send migrants to Costa Rica. We'll get more on that story in just a moment. Daily... where should we go next? The Mail. We've got the Mail. It's time the world faces evil empire in Tehran. And last but not least, the Daily Star. Reassuring vow from tycoon who plans to rebuild the doomed ship. We'll add a few more lifeboats on the new Titanic. That's right, the mega millionaire who plans on rebuilding the Titanic has come up with a brainwave. Lifeboats. Give that man a medal, say the Daily Star. Well, 3 people that deserve medals are my top pundits tonight. I'm delighted to welcome the political commentator Emma Webb, former Conservative MP and farmer Neil Parish, and GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. And really, it's the only story in town, Nigel Nelson, and it's Israel's next steps following the attack by Iran last night. This is an issue for Israel and for the Western world.
Yeah, absolutely. And one rather hopes that they don't take a next step. And that seems to be what everyone is urging. I mean, what happened last night, it was a bit like that fight scene in Bridget Jones between Colin Firth and Hugh Grant, that a lot of punches were thrown, but not a huge amount of damage was done.
Yeah.
Iran says that's the end of it. Whether we believe them or not, we don't know, but that's what they say. It'd be quite good if it was the end of it, that they've saved face, that they've... which they had to do after the attack on the Damascus consulate. If that is the end of it, that would be great. I mean, Israel say no, they'll do something at the time of their choosing, but let's hope not.
Do you think, Neil Parish, the intervention of Joe Biden, the President of the United States, is significant? He's been saying to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, take the win, by which he means you've defended yourself successfully, don't react.
I think that is the answer, because I think what the Iranians are doing is it's basically that was pin pricking yesterday. They could have. But, they could have used missiles, many more missiles than they had. They used a lot of drones, which they knew, hopefully, and thank goodness they had such a good shield, the Israelis, and they shot most of it down, helped the Americans, ourselves, and everybody. And so what you've got to be careful of, are the Iranians playing this game? If we irritate the Israelis enough, they will then attack us substantially, and then we've got the excuse to go to war.
Yeah.
And I think this is what you've got to be careful of. And I think if we're not careful, the Iranians are playing a very clever game here. The trouble with Netanyahu is that he was caught with his trousers down, basically, with the security situation when the horrendous attack by Hamas on the Israelis. And so I think, you see, he now has to prove to be the biggest, hardest man ever. And the problem is, I think he could create a total war in the Middle East if you're not careful. And and I think the Iranians are saying, right, OK, if we keep prodding him, let's see what he'll do. And I think it's very dangerous. And so, therefore, I think the Americans, ourselves, the French, everybody have got to try and say to the Israelis, we very much support you. We very much want you to be able to defend yourself, but just be careful, because I think this could be very, very serious. And I think if we're not careful, the Iranians may be playing the more clever game here if we're not careful.
Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, Emma Webb, is a controversial and divisive figure. Is he the problem or the solution right now?
I think that's almost besides the point. Obviously, Israel does have its internal politics that are also playing into this. Many people are not happy with Netanyahu, not happy with his leadership. But I think that, I mean, you're right in the sense that Iran could have taken the literal nuclear option. They have enough enriched uranium to do that. I think what they want to do is to turn
is to turn Israel's allies against Israel. Israel haven't been doing so well in the PR war recently. And so it is actually a very careful balance to strike, where you need the West and Israel's allies to show enough force to deter aggression, which is what we didn't do with Russia soon enough.
Right.
But also to not show too much offensive action such that we allow it to escalate. So it's a very, very difficult balance to strike, I think. So ultimately, I think actually that bigger picture is much more important than Netanyahu's specific leadership in this. Obviously, Israel has a right to defend itself, and it must defend itself. But I think you have to see this in the larger geopolitical context when we're thinking about the sort of ultimate consequences of this in terms of regional escalation.
I think, Emma, you're right, but I think the problem is that Netanyahu is kept in power by some very tough, right-wing religious groups in the cabinet, and I think you'll find that they will want an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and I think this is the problem. And I think if they're not careful, the Israelis, like I said, the Iranians are playing the Israelis to start the war.
Yeah, or the other way round.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a danger that Israel wants to actually... Iran's been a thorn in their side for a long time. Israel may want this. It was a very odd thing to do, to go and strike the consulate in Damascus, which is sovereign territory, and was almost certain to provoke an attack by
I'm an
Iran.
supporter of Israel, and even I thought that was a curious
It was just odd.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Israel might be thinking, look, we wanted to take out Iran for ages. We know that if we do it now, the West will support us. I mean, America will come on board.
Yeah.
They're saying they won't take part in a counter-offensive. They would take part in a full-scale war.
Well, and also they would take part in anything to defend Israel as well.
Yeah.
And I think, I think Netanyahu, if you're not careful, is actually egging it on. And I think this is the danger.
Does he enjoy your confidence? Do you rate Netanyahu? Is he a dangerous man?
I think he's a dangerous man because I think he's a man who has had such much power in Israel for so long. There is a degree of corruption around him, as you know.
He's a conservative, so you might politically and ideologically lean in his direction. But is your concern to do with his makeup or his politics or both?
Yeah, I'm a conservative friend of Israel, so therefore I declare my interest. But I think Netanyahu is doing damage to Israel now because I feel that he has, as you quite rightly say, I know it's not a propaganda war, but I mean the Israelis have spectacularly lost that because of their scale of what they've done in Gaza. And
I actually think that they've lost it because of the vile show of anti-Semitism on the streets of London that have threatened a lot of people who would have otherwise spoken out into submission, just through the sheer presence of them every single weekend. And I think that has actually had an effect. It's had an effect, I think, on even the considerations of our government. I mean, in the way that people like Lord David Cameron have framed their criticisms. So I think actually that's not the reason why I think.
Yeah, but I think, Emma, it's wider than that, because I think the situation in Gaza, the restricting of the aid to the final stages where the Palestinians are starving. However much I support Israel, I think they have gone too far, and I think it's all about Netanyahu. That's the problem, not necessarily about Israel and the conflict. It's all about saving his political position, because he has now to be the hardest man ever.
Of course. Nigel, briefly, before we get on to Rwanda, how far should Britain and America go to defend and support Israel?
Well, we should certainly defend and support them. It was absolutely right that RAF jets were involved last night in shooting down the drones. What we were trying to do is make sure those drones didn't get through, cause a load of destruction, and that would have led us into war. Yeah. All that is right. What Biden is saying is that they won't join an Israeli counterstrike. That is right too. Anything you can do to dampen this down, that would be the best way. So whether I'm right, Israel might be provoking it, whether Neil's right, Iran might be provoking it, we don't want either side.
What about regime change in Iran, which is a truly reprehensible regime? Could that happen? Should it happen? And should Britain help?
Well, I mean, we're then in a situation of a war rather like Iraq.
Gulf War 3.
Yeah, but the whole thing is it would be a lot...
We saw the Hangover 3.
But it's a lot more difficult. We're talking about a well-armed armed forces in Iran.
Almost nuclear.
They probably have some nuclear weapons, or at least they can develop them. I think the Wall Street Journal today said they've got enough enriched uranium for 3 bombs.
Yeah.
So there's the danger of that. You're talking about 800,000 troops, regular troops and reservists. There'll be a much more difficult nut to crack than Iran.
And friends in Beijing and Moscow.
Yeah. And also in Iran, the people have been, I mean, you've seen it all on social media. The people are not happy with the regime.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people in Iran who want regime change. So I think that's something that hopefully, I mean, God, I hope I see it in my lifetime. I would love to see Iran topple their own
That has to very much
regime.
come from within. All right, you can put a certain amount of external pressure, but I think the point that we've all been discussing here is there are some parts of the Israeli military and some parts of the government that have been itching to have.
I don't think any kind of forced regime changes on the cards. That would just be so hypothetical.
Let's take a look at the Times now. Britain has entered talks to replicate the Rwanda migrant deportation scheme with Armenia, Ivory Coast, Costa Rica and Botswana, according to leaked documents that reveal the government's extensive search for another third country deal are in the offing. Emma, if Rwanda doesn't work, Botswana, Costa Rica,
I'm sure that the activist lawyers would find a problem with all of those countries too. I mean, it's almost getting a bit silly now. I don't think... Does anybody really believe that the flights are going to take off in spring?
What do you think, Neil? Do you think that the Prime Minister could surprise everyone and get Rwanda happening?
He may yet, but I still think it's an outside chance. I mean, I've said this before, but I think if Rwanda doesn't work out, then I think you've got to go back to the drawing board. I think looking for other countries... I mean, I think it's just too complicated.
I think we should leave the EHRC and open our options up.
And I also think we've got to find more agreements with individual countries, with, you know, like they did with Albania and so on. And I think that is a situation. I mean, I think so much political capital has been expended on this, and I think this is the problem that the Prime Minister's got and the party's got, and I think it's almost insoluble now. But I mean, there may be some flights that take off. Who knows? We might all be proved to be wrong, but I suspect not.
And yet, Nigel, immigration, illegal immigration, stop the boats, is probably the Tories' last opportunity to move the dial before the election.
Yeah, they might move it a bit. I mean, still people don't care about it as much as they care about the cost of living crisis and the NHS. Those are the things that come top in every poll. Yes,
don't they relate? They dovetail, don't they? The cost of living crisis, the NHS. If you have high levels of legal and illegal immigration, that impacts departmental budgets and also puts pressure on our already creaking infrastructure.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure illegal does. Legal immigration...
Of course it does. I mean, illegal immigration is costing £7 million a year by way of accommodation alone.
Or more.
Plus demands on the NHS.
But Rwanda would cost even more, so they're not worried about money. I mean, if you send people to Rwanda, even under the original £120 million scheme, you could keep an asylum seeker in a hotel for 12 years for the 600,000 quid it would cost you to send there. So money is out of it. Legal immigration, a different matter. This government's been encouraging it. That's why we are where we are. And the kind of knock-on effects are, if, for instance, you stop foreign students coming here, tuition fees for British students will have to go up. So those are the knock-on effects that come from legal immigration.
OK, a fascinating debate. Well, next up, more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages, including the Express and the Sun. Plus, in an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll, we've been asking, should Rishi Sunak embrace the right of his party and bring back Liz Truss, Suella Braverman and Boris Johnson? The results are in. I shall reveal all. Plus, we'll be debating that live on the show with Liz Truss's favourite policy guru. That's next.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
is it OK to call people fat? I won't call Bev fat because she isn't. She won't call me fat because I'm not. But the fitness fanatic, Derek Evans, you might know him better as 90s icon Mr Motivator, recently told a podcast, diabetes have gone through the roof. You should be able to call people fat.
Well, he joins us now. Good morning, Derek. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great to see you. So I think what you're getting at is this idea that we've become so polite about weight that we're ignoring the elephant in the room. If you'll forgive the phraseology there, and actually sometimes you've got to be cruel to be kind.
Well, actually, you know, this has been taken out of all context. I actually didn't say you're entitled to call people fat. What I did say is that in the 80s and 90s, I remember the way I got into television, there was a gentleman walking at reception while I was waiting for the people I was training. And for some reason, I got up and I prodded him in the belly. And I said to him, you need to deal with that. That was fat. We have a nation where obesity, diabetes is killing every one of us. And unless we take responsibility for our health, rather than waiting for government to do this, government to do that, it is our responsibility, right, to look after our independence and our health. And as we get older, it's even more critical, right? And that's why I'm here as an example saying to you, listen, I'm 71 years of age and movement is medicine. And you can't sit around watching television and not going out to the gym or wherever. You will never, ever be able to look after your family and everything you've worked for. You will lose it. I've never seen a deposit account behind a hearse. No matter what you work for, the most important thing you can do with your life is every hour, do something active. Every hour.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The results of our latest poll are in. Should Rishi Sunak embrace the right of his party and bring back Liz Truss, Suella Braverman and Boris Johnson? Well, let me tell you that it's another landslide. 77.9% say yes, bring back Braverman, Truss and Johnson. 22.1% say no. A couple of extra headlines, the front pages hot off the press, courtesy of Ben. Let's have a look. We've got the Express. And they lead with PM calls for calm heads to prevail after Iran drone and missile strikes. World holds its breath as Israel vows to exact a price. And The Sun, Mullah's attack Israel, RAF Top Guns foil Iran blitz. And we can be very proud. Now it's time for the last word, and reports suggest the Tory party are plotting to elect Suella Braverman as their next leader, which could open the door for a return to politics for Boris Johnson. And with Liz Truss grabbing the headlines, a tell-all memoir called 10 Years to Save the West. Should Rishi Sunak get on the front foot, embrace the right of his party and bring all three into the fold? Well, join me to discuss this is Liz Truss's favourite policy guru, director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood. Mark, great to have you on the show. Do you think that would be good leadership from Rishi Sunak to actually co-opt the talents of, in particular, Braverman and Truss?
Yes, I mean, you always say a Prime Minister should embrace all of the talents in their party. In fact, when Margaret Thatcher began her government, went on to be a very successful government, she actually populated her cabinet largely with people who disagreed with her, at least for the first 2 or 3 years of her government. So whether he could actually get any of these three to return to high office at this stage, I think is unlikely, to be honest. I'd be very surprised if Rishi Sunak did offer cabinet jobs to any of those three. I'd be even more surprised if any of the three of them accepted. But I think there's a rather more important test of leadership than that, which is, are you listening to them? Even if they're not in your cabinet, are you listening to senior politicians who've served in high office? Two of these three have been Prime Minister. Suella Braverman, of course, has been Home Secretary. And that's what worries me somewhat, that there's a bit of a bunker mentality at number 10. And I would hope that he would reach out to those who are ECHR sceptical. We've just heard your previous discussion, Mark, about Rwanda and will the flights get off the ground? I'm as sceptical as your panel. But I think that Rishi Sunak should reach out to those who are saying we'll probably need to leave the European Court of Human Rights if you want an immigration policy that can actually be functional and work. So probably for me, I might be in the 22%, was it, in the poll, who said, I'm not totally sure they should be back in government, but he should be on the blower to them pretty regularly, not just those three, but a whole swathe of other Conservatives who seem slightly locked out of the corridors of power at the moment.
Stay with us, Mark Littlewood. Let's bring in my top pundits tonight. Neil Parish, Nigel Nelson and Emma Webb. And let me ask you, I mean, the point is, Mark Littlewood, that this is kitchen sink time for Rishi Sunak. So what is the political equivalent of throwing the kitchen sink at it? What can Rishi Sunak do in the weeks and months ahead that might move the dial for him and his party?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would have thought it does hinge somewhat on the immigration point. He's got to show really clear blue water between him and the Labour Party, clear differences. I must admit, even as a keen political and economic observer, I sometimes struggle to work out how many cigarette papers there really are between the policies of the Conservative and the Labour front bench. And I would suggest this, that if his Rwanda plan doesn't work, and let's see if it does, I haven't completely written it off, but if it doesn't, because it's blocked by the courts, that the Conservative Party would pledge to exit the European Court of Human Rights. We would withdraw from the convention. I think that would be pretty kitchen sinky, Mark, if he was willing to take that pledge.
There you go. Emma Webb, what do you think is a kitchen sink policy from Rishi Sunak? He's got nothing to lose. What do you reckon?
I think they should put their money where their mouth is. And Mark very rightly said it would be a good thing for him to bring in some of the ECHR sceptics. I think if the Rwanda plan doesn't work, which we all know it isn't going to, and it's not just that, it's also the recent news this week about the climate ruling, which was frankly anti-democratic. We need to leave the ECHR. That is the policy that I think, if the Conservatives are going to make the best use of the time that they have left, that they should put that at the absolute top of their agenda.
Only a couple of seconds left. Nigel Nelson, what do you think a kitchen sink policy might be for Sunak?
There isn't one. I mean, he really is.
The kitchen empty.
The kitchen is empty, and so is the sink, I'm afraid. I don't think that now there's anything they can do. Even tax cuts aren't working.
Couple of seconds. What would you do if you were still on those Tory backbenches, Neil?
I think leaving the ECHR is probably the right thing, because I think, you know, they try to line us up with Russia, but we actually have a good courts of our own. We have our own judiciary that can also be independent, so therefore we don't actually need that European court.
Listen, Mark Littlewood, lovely to have you on the show, joining us for the last word. We'll catch up soon. Have a good week. And my thanks to my amazing pundits, Emma, Neil and Nigel. Really enjoyed your company. I'm back on Friday at 8 o'clock for Friday Night Live. I've got well-connected journalist Petronella Wyatt, football legend Tony Cottee and TV news icon Hugh Edwards. No, Nicholas Owen. Hugh's in the garden. He likes to be on his knees. Digging. See you Friday at 8. Headliners is next. Thanks for your company this weekend.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So there has been plenty of showers around in the north, all thanks to an area of low pressure situated out towards the north of the UK at the moment, but it will slowly move its way towards us through the rest of the weekend and into the start of Monday. Higher pressure does stay close by towards the south and west for a time, bringing some clear skies through this Sunday evening, but those showers in the north and west slowly push their way south and eastwards as we go through the early hours of Monday morning, turning particularly heavy across northern parts of England. And we could even see some snow across the high ground of Scotland. And it will be a chilly night here, temperatures dropping into the low single figures, and even in the south around 7 or 8 degrees. Monday starts a bit chilly, but quite a blustery start to the day. Brisk northwesterly winds help clear that band of rain across the southeast through Monday morning, leaving a drier day. There will be some sunshine around, but some showers quite quickly developing from the northwest. These turning wintry across the high ground of northern England and Scotland, and it will be a much chillier day than we've seen over the weekend. Struggling to reach much above 12 or 13 in the south, and even struggling to reach double figures in the north. Tuesday does start a bit drier for most of us, though. There will be plenty of sunshine through the morning. Still the odd 1 or 2 showers around across northern and western parts, and perhaps a few bubbling up across eastern parts of England, but there should be plenty of sunshine around. However, temperatures still close to average. Still a few showers around on Wednesday and Thursday, but there are hints of something more settled later in the week, and temperatures returning closer to average.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to win our biggest prize of the year so far. First, there's a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash for you to spend this summer. Then, we want to send you on a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for 2 worth £10,000. Thanks to Variety Cruises, you'll be able to choose from any of their 2025 Greek adventures and discover Greece like never before. And with flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, all you have to do is relax. We'll also give you these terrific travel treats. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Do you mind if I ask you a little bit about Sebastian? It really amazes me how